Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the second webinar in this lunchtime series on working from home and remote working. I am Gabriel, MBB Senior Executive moderating this lunchtime series. Last week, we tackled the issue from a more research perspective, featuring presentations by Dr. Mari Briguglio from the University of Malta and Ms. Diane Pelly, who is a PhD student at the University College Dublin. A recording is available on our Facebook page for anyone who missed this session and would like to follow it. This time around, we are happy to have with us three panelists from leading businesses in Malta. I welcome Ms. Sarah Mifsud, Chief People Officer at Go, Ms. Caroline Bohajar-Klas, Head of Human Resources and Corporate Sustainability at HSBC Malta, and Mr. David Vella, Chief People Officer at Healy Ventures. Today's session will take the form of a panel discussion which will allow our panelists to share their own professional experiences and opinions on working from home and remote working. If you have any questions or comments which you'd like them to address, please type these out in the chat below, and I will also pass these questions on to our panelists accordingly. So if you have a question specifically to any panelist in particular, please indicate so. I hope you all find this to be an interesting session and we can kickstart the panel discussion. So, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Sarah, David, and Caroline. It's a pleasure. I'd like to start off by asking each of you to introduce yourself and also the role within your company. And then also to give us a quick overview of the remote working or working from home policies which your company has already implemented. Maybe we can start off with Sarah.
Sure. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for the invite. Always a pleasure to discuss this topic. It's something that is certainly very much in our reality and something that is constantly unfolding, in all fairness. And as it unfolds, we continue to adapt. Gabriel, as you explained, I am Chief People Officer at Go. Obviously, together with my team, we are responsible to run the company from the HR side. Now, basically, when it comes to our remote policy, in all fairness, our policy was drafted very early on, because early on the company had decided that we will continue a remote first approach, even post-COVID at the time. So the policy, basically in a nutshell, encompasses that any employee can work as they deem fit, either from the office or remotely. So our offices remained open always. Why? For different reasons. But we knew that, assuming that we have all the safety measures in place at the office, it was important that we keep our offices open even for the mental health and safety of our people. But employees can work up to 3 days from the office as they deem fit, and also in collaboration with their teams or their management. Obviously, then the policy also encompasses other guidelines, so to say, that help employees work well remotely, because this was a complete shift for us. It was not something that we thought of doing so quickly, because we already had some teams working remotely, in all fairness, but not to the extent of the full company. So then the policy also ensures that it gives guidelines to both employees and management to work well remotely. So maybe in a nutshell, we can go into it more later on, should you wish.
Yes, we'll expand further through the other questions and maybe even questions from our audience. Thank you very much for the introduction, Sarah. Caroline, maybe you'd like to introduce yourself and also give your own sort of overview of the policies implemented at HSBC Malta.
Yes, sure. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. So obviously, currently, I hold the position of Head of HR and Sustainability here in HSBC Malta. Prior to joining HSBC, I was based in Singapore for 6 years. I was the global head of talent for AXA Insurance in Asia Pacific. Before that, I spent 20 years working with ST Microelectronics. 10 years I did them in Malta, and the other 10 years a bit all over the world. And then I ended up in Asia, and then full circle back home. So why I'm mentioning this, because I think remote working for me personally has started, you know, in the late 90s. Now, please don't calculate how old I am. I'm still very young. But nonetheless, when I was doing regional and global roles, remote working was already there, right? Because you have teams spread all over the globe, and you barely see them. Maybe I used to meet my team, you know, once or twice a year at the most, and the rest is done everything remotely. So to me personally, this is a bit like going back, you know, in a way to what I'm used to. So for me personally, I didn't feel any change. However, obviously, taken into the context of Malta, and obviously, you know, Malta being so small, I think this was quite a big change locally, even to a certain extent in HSBC, even though at HSBC we have a lot of flexibility in how people want to work or choose to work. So we always had the opportunity for people, if they wanted to work from home every now and then. Obviously, COVID, you know, whether you liked it or not, we had to adjust very quickly. And at the height of the pandemic, the bank had, you know, close to 80% or even more of its employees working from home, which brought, you know, good things and also challenges. And you know, putting on my other hat, besides the head of HR, I'm the head of sustainability. I think in terms of sustainability, both from, you know, an environmental impact perspective, I think we all remember those days when you could go out in the streets and within 10 minutes you can get to anywhere you want. I wish all the luck to everyone today to try to make a journey in 10 minutes. Just yesterday, you know, or even the day before, when I tried to go to the office, it took me 1 hour, 20 minutes to do just, you know, 9 kilometers. So I think the way we need to look at it is definitely, you know, I agree with Sarah that one has to look at remote working from the well-being perspective of our employees, where we ensure that, you know, we don't go into complete remote working mode, because it creates isolation, it kills to a certain degree creativity. People look forward to go to work, to network, to communicate, to collaborate, so on and so forth, the things that we are used to do. At the same time, looking at the workforce that we have, people also need to manage a bit of work-life balance. In fact, when I speak to a lot of parents, and I am a parent, a lot of parents tell me, you know, I'm not wasting 2 hours in traffic, which those 2 hours now I can recover, you know, being with the kids, helping them with homework or supporting them, you know, with all the things that they have to do day in, day out. So this is great. This is something we need to retain. So we need to strike a balance. In HSBC at global level, we have launched several policies in the past 1.5 years. In Malta, actually, we were the first HSBC entity to formalize this. And we have a policy in place now, which is more structured, what it means to work remotely, how you manage performance, how you know, all the things that sometimes you don't think about them, but then in the day-to-day, it becomes a reality. So we have a policy in place. We work very closely with our union MUB partners to discuss this, to define this, and I think so far it's working well. Obviously, there are also roles we have to acknowledge that maybe you can't do from home if they are front-facing customer roles. So there is no way that you can serve a customer, you know, remotely. Some do, by the way. There are lots of companies out there that are revolutionized now the way they operate, but obviously we need to retain the balance. On the sustainability side, which I think for me it is also very important, that we have to take a good look at what we gained during, you know, the height of the pandemic, which means, you know, congestion, pollution, CO2 emissions. that we have regained that we should not lose sight of. And I think we need to put this on the table. There are lots of discussions today on this aspect where we should not allow ourselves to go back as to how we were, because it would be wrong and short-sighted from the environmental side. And God knows we need it. Malta is very small. We need to protect it, and we need to make it sustainable even for future generations. And I think we, as heads of HR, where we define policies of how our people will be working, both now and in the future, will play a major role in that.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And even on the aspect of which you mentioned regarding just traveling to and from the office, apart from the sustainability aspect, we also see from research across the globe that travel is one of the major stresses or stressors for a lot of people, especially those who have to travel long distances to work. So there's also a well-being aspect rather than just a sustainability aspect. David, could you introduce yourself and also provide a quick overview of the remote working policies which you have implemented? Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon to all. Same here. Pleasure to be on such a topic which basically nowadays I think it is on top of our agenda. I'm the Chief People Officer at Healy Ventures, based in Malta. Having said so, I mean, this was, I would say, a learning experience of a lifetime, these 18 months. I think the main reason is that although we do have a number of companies which are based here in Malta, but in total we have 18 countries, and they are spread on a footprint of 9 other different jurisdictions. And when I start rewinding a little bit what has happened in the past 18 months, I think the first thing that comes to mind is a huge learning experience, even if we put aside all the challenges that we had to face. I think the first learning experience was that if we try, we can work in a different way. I think in Malta, the mentality, the fact that working remotely for some business leaders, for some companies, it was a myth, it was a taboo, not to be spoken of, and maybe only a few people were doing so. Having said so, now that myth, I think it's gone. It can be, proven that people can work from home, but I'm sure that later on we'll have opportunity to discuss this. Very similarly to Sarah as well, our first reaction to the pandemic was basically 3. Number 1, protect our employees, protect our customers, and protect the business. And that was the approach that we took. Now, due to the diversity of our businesses, I mean, we vary from engineering companies to gas and oil distribution, to logistics, to IT, to restaurants, to properties. So obviously, we couldn't take a blank approach, as even Caroline said, those businesses that basically you can't do without a face-to-face service to the guests. Basically, they can't work from home. So over there, the biggest, the big challenge was to insert as quickly as possible health and safety protocols to protect both customers and also our employees. On the other hand, we immediately put a task force together when we were saying at the very early of March, a task force together, and whereby we immediately drew up a plan. And where possible, we had invited everybody to go and work from home. Having said so, we did not close the offices as well. So we did leave that window that people, if they need something or they feel that they need some time in the office, they could come. But this was the general approach that we took. Obviously, since the markets, they were evolving, the pandemic started evolving in a different manner. We had to study and react market by market. I mean, I remember, for example, the Baltic states, the peak of the pandemic hit very, very late in the year. So up until, even in October of last year, they were quite living, I would say, pretty much a normal life. Yes, they did have restrictions, but not as much as in countries like in Greece, where they were on complete lockdown, UK, Romania, etc. So basically, we had to go hand in hand with each jurisdiction, understand what the risks are, and adapt these policies ongoing. When it comes to to measures, one of the things that we've looked upon immediately was how to support people when they are working from home. For the majority, it was a new experience. So we ensured that very regularly we hold online sessions, starting off by how to effectively manage your teams and effectively manage your works remotely. I mean, Zoom, Teams, Skype, and whatnot. People did make use of them, but not as frequently as it started happening in 2019. The other area that we focused upon was the well-being of the people. The mental health aspect, well-being in terms of working from home, diet, exercises, how you switch on and switch off. So we did engage with professional partners that delivered as well training sessions and coaching sessions online, specifically on these areas. We also had to revisit as well a little bit our benefits. At Hilo Ventures, we have an allowance, which before we used to call the work-life balance allowance kind of thing. It's a sum that every employee has at his or her disposal to make use as they feel that it will help them have a better life. So being from a gym membership, or paying for a holiday, going to the spa, or paying for the kids to go to summer schools, maybe, etc., etc. We started realizing that people were not equipped at home to work from home, being, not even sometimes a proper desk, a proper office chair. Their internet connection sometimes was too slow for the job that they had to deliver. So obviously, we even diverted funds in helping people to basically be able to even purchase an office chair, which, working on a normal kitchen chair, it's not very ideal for such a long time. So we looked as well into these details and assisted as much as we could people to feel really comfortable to work from home. So that was, in a nutshell, what we have done. Besides having clear guidelines for office use, in order to monitor the capacity, in order not to have a lot of people, traceability, etc., etc., according to the local health guidelines of each market.
Thank you very much, David. And yes, on your point about how lacking sort of the infrastructure at home to work comfortably and even safely, it's also something that came out in our own research study when we found that over a quarter of the population don't have a quarter of our respondent pool rather don't have a private workplace at home, and our respondents were of higher than average income levels. So you could imagine that for the general population, it's an even more major issue. Sarah, from the quick overview that you have just provided, and even from our previous discussions with your team, we know that Go has really embraced the idea of the remote working model, and you have just said that workers can come to the office for a maximum of 2 days, I believe.
3 days, yes.
Every week.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit more about the employee reaction to these measures? Were there any teething problems, or were they immediately happy with this offer?
Yes, so basically when we decided to go fully remote, so to say, especially because the pandemic accelerated that process, first of all, what we did was we set up a COVID response team. And through that team, we could dissect the business into its three pillars. So firstly, protecting our people, our customers, and our business. And each pillar, we made sure that all the stops were covered. We used to meet every other week, and if needed more often. And then the respective people would implement what would have been decided. Following that, then communications with the employees started to kick in. So from different types of communications, because at Go we obviously have um, different types of workers. So obviously for us it is never a one size fits all situation. So we've had communication through surveys, for example. How are people doing at the moment? What do they need? Where are they struggling? What are they enjoying? Depending on your situation at home, everybody has a different situation at home, or were they working from remotely. So we started to get information directly from our people. Also, the company immediately started what we today call our live events. They happen every Friday, whereby employees can ask any question under the sun to XCOM, and we are there answering, conversing, talking about any topic that they need or any suggestions that they had. So because communication was so open, we could take action very, very fast. And I would say that that was basically, the what helped us ensure that our people were one at the forefront. And in fact, even all our conversations as they are today have people at the center. So it all starts with that. So following the communication flow, then we started to obviously, as even David mentioned, right, get the needs of our people and started to implement the many different things that people needed, from, yes, organizing physical activity for our people and their whole family, to organizing activities for the kids at home, for people who had kids, because you end up needing to work, but obviously somebody might have a child that you want to get them a bit of the tablet. So what can I do? And we assisted also sort of beyond their work needs. There was coaching, online therapy sessions, whatever was requested, we made sure that we implemented. um, so the teething problems, obviously, yes, certainly this was something that we did not know. You try to anticipate everything, right? But it's your people that tell you what they need and what would help them. So the first thing we did was we made sure that everybody had the same setup at home or wherever they were working remotely as they had at the office. So, making sure that you have the right tools is step one. And our IT team did a fantastic job at setting up everybody in their respective areas. Also, for our frontliners, we offered, for example, alternative accommodation, because we wanted to ensure that they felt safe for their family as they did their job. So if they did not want to stay home because maybe somebody was vulnerable at home, and they would have preferred to live in an alternative accommodation for a few weeks or a few months, the company offered it. We did the research, HR took care of finding you the apartment, and everything was set up for our frontliners, and that was offered as well. um, um, Something also I believe David mentioned, making sure that you upskill your team. So definitely another teething problem, so to say, would be ensuring that your team is upskilled in managing people remotely or in collaborating remotely. So little things, little ideas that we had to communicate and experiment with. There was a lot of experimentation to see what works, what doesn't work, what we like, what we don't like, in making sure that we collaborate together. So again, online tools, measures, right? So productivity measuring tools also were introduced, and new tools were introduced that people needed, to ensure that sort of these teething problems were addressed. And as I said before, the well-being part was taken was taken into account very, very seriously. So the offices did remain open, all the measures were in place and beyond. But we felt that it's very important that everybody's situation is taken into account. So you had maybe people who were living alone, for example. And to be honest, the office was then, it became quite empty, so to say. So coming to the office was quite safe, in all fairness. But yes, definitely there were situations where people needed to work from the office, and we definitely not only allowed it, but made sure that all the measures were taking place, irrespective if we had one person in the office or 100 people in the office. So having desk workers, remote workers, and frontliners, you can imagine that we had to obviously adapt to the needs of these three sets of people.
Thank you, Sarah. That's quite a comprehensive strategy, and it's also good that you mentioned the upskilling of workers. Was, for instance, some responses that we received in our own research was that some people are not able to work from home because either they do not have access to cloud storage, or they do not know how to use these types of software. So obviously, if we're going to implement something like this in the long term, we would like to embrace the future of work, but we also wouldn't want to leave people behind
Definitely,
in the process. So upskilling would become even more key.
definitely.
Caroline, some employees and business owners have lamented the lack of socialization between colleagues, which results from remote working, and I believe we have already touched very briefly upon it in the last few minutes. Is this something that you have seen at HSBC Malta? And do you have any ideas or suggestions on how this could be tackled, perhaps in the long term?
Yes, indeed. The answer is yes. You know, that's why one needs to really try to find a balance. So I think education is key here, because as we discussed and as also mentioned already, if you've never done it for a long period of time, it definitely, you know, it can be quite challenging. So I think education is key in for me in three areas, and I think line managers here play a very important role, because obviously their behavior, they need to role model certain behaviors. Working from home, for example, does not mean that the person is contactable 24 hours a day now, just because we're connected and we are working, you know, from the side of the office, from the side of our sofa, or maybe whichever room we decide to work from. So I think a lot of education is number one key. We have obviously faced situations where people don't want to work from home because, you know, going to the office is something that is very social. It boosts them, it helps them connect with colleagues. Especially, I may say, I noticed the behavior, you know, I separated. Obviously, those who have families, I think they were the ones that adapted the most, because they could juggle better, they could manage things better at home. But obviously, maybe the younger generation who do not have responsibilities at home and don't feel so tied up, they want to come to the office, you know, to see their friends, their colleagues. So I think giving that flexibility as well within the safety parameters was key for us, which is what we did. But I mean, if I look at my own team, you know, I have situations where some of them would tell me, look, I prefer to work from home. So in our roster, when we do plan our roster, and that's how we're working still today, I prefer, you know, that I'll come one time, once a week in the office. Is that okay for you? Yes, of course, it's fine for me. You know, for me, the most important thing is that as long as the work gets done, it doesn't matter where you are, and as long as you're okay with it, you know, and you're driving it and performance is there, there's no issue for me. I think it needs to be driven, you know, in the day-to-day by the line managers, role modeling, and being, you know, aware of the constraints of the individual. As Sarah mentioned, lots of people, you start discovering also other things then. So there needs to be a lot of communication and conversation with the people of what works for them. Of course, you cannot have a solution that will fit everyone. So we need also to be flexible, to say, okay, we have a policy, but let's discuss, because we can't be rigid. And again, if the work gets done in the right way, why should we, put so many constraints to it? It pinges, right, on performance. So I think that's what we did. Lots of conversations, lots of training. So like Sarah mentioned, we did remote management training. We also worked with a partner externally to help people manage time working remotely, because this was something, how do I manage time? How do I split? And also flexibility. For example, it was okay. I had a team member who have, young children, especially in the height of the pandemic, when the kids were also trying to do online schooling. And let's face it, a 6-year-old, spending 4 hours in front of a laptop, I don't think, it works very well. So there were times where I had, as a line manager, I had to discuss with my team saying, look, if at this particular hour between, I don't know, 10 to 12 or 9 to 12, this is a nightmare for you to work from home and try to tend to 2 young toddlers, it's okay, don't worry, switch off. And then when you can, you switch on later. You need to give that flexibility, because if I just go and tell them, no, you have to do it at that time because that's when everybody is there, I don't know. I mean, that's not really, and if the job allows it, this is always my point. If the job allows it, then so be it. Let it be, and then the commitment you get from the people when they see you going, meeting them their way, it's amazing. The motivation, the gratitude that they show, the appreciation. We also did, for example, one thing which we tried to do, because this was feedback that we collated. We used to do what we still do it, well-being survey every 6 months. So from that, it gives us lots of information. So even we started doing sessions and working closely with even external partners, how to keep, kids entertained, so that sometimes the parents can have a break, doing things online, games online, poster competitions, quizzes, everything. So, and we're still doing those, by the way. I think at the beginning, obviously, we had lots of participation. Now it's dying out because now people are, going out more. It's summer. So, but still, we tried to respond to the needs of the people, ensuring, obviously, the service and the work that needed to be done doesn't suffer, because ultimately, we are a business and we have to deliver. So keeping these things in mind, we also did, and we're still doing, how now we are, half of the year is over. So for us, it's also a reflection of what we've done so far throughout mid-year, looking at performance so far. So focusing a lot how we deliver feedback on performance to people, again, remotely, because most probably a lot of one-to-ones are still being done using Zoom, how to use certain technology. In HSBC, obviously, we have lots of tools that were introduced since last year. So you have multiple means of media that people can use. And obviously, we have more things that are coming up now, which are already in discussion, where we will then, at a global level, we are formalizing this hybrid model that HSBC also is introducing across the globe. So for us, the future means we will work in a hybrid model. There's no question about it.
Thank you, Caroline. And yes, I agree, especially if the work allows it, and if you're working from home and you're not tied to the opening hours of the office block, then flexibility becomes even more possible, as long as the work is done, as you said. David, our findings show that remote working is not an all or nothing solution for any sector, and even for any business or employee. As you already said, Healy Ventures are involved in various sectors. Could you tell us if and how your group tailored the remote working offer to the different ventures that you were involved in, and perhaps even to the different types of jobs in each venture?
Here I think this is a $1 million question, because when it comes to remote working, as Caroline first said something, a word which is very, very important. It's finding the right balance. And finding the right balance, it's not an easy job, because, as Caroline as well very well said, you do not only need to take in consideration the type of business that you have. In our case as well, even the cultural mindset of the people from various countries, the function that that person does within the organization, but also the individual per se, because individuals, they have their own needs. And as Caroline said, it is practically impossible to make a policy that will fit everyone into this. So I think that we need to be, I would say we need to, yes, give this flexibility. Now we know that it works. We know that working from home does not impact productivity. Our businesses continued to function and function very well. I agree as well with, I believe, what Natalia has just mentioned in her comments. Yes, unfortunately, we do have some individuals within the organization that maybe they are a little bit more resistant in order to let their people work from home. So I believe that it is our responsibility as well to try and coach these, especially line managers, to better be able to better manage their teams remotely. So there are so many aspects which are in favor of remote working. One of the policies, for example, that we have changed, and I'm going to tie it back even what Caroline said in the beginning. It's about sustainability. Yes, we do have certain jobs within the company that they do require transportation. So, if we have a country where we have 17 restaurants, our operations people, our training, our HR people, they need to visit these restaurants, in order to engage with employees. But now we have changed our policy that says all company cars will need to be hybrid or electric going forward. We are also encouraging more, and now we are looking with our IT departments to look into more solution where digitization is involved. That means even how we process our documentation. Do we really need to print, sign, and scan when nowadays electronic signatures are with us? So it is an ongoing process, I believe. We followed what my two other colleagues said. So it's all mostly about communication. It's more about listening to people. Moving forward, very similarly to what even Sarah said, we have already established a threshold that we are saying, listen, from the normal 5 days a week, you have, at the moment, we are running from 3 from the office to 3 from home to from the office. Let's see how this will take us forward, and as well there, each individual will make his own arrangements together with his or her HOD. What I would like to add at this point in time, however, I don't believe that we should see this work from home as the only way forward, because we have already skimmed through a little bit what it means to people, coming to the office. So I think when we are looking into finding this balance, we also need to ensure that not to jeopardize the team spirit, not to jeopardize our culture and values, because you could see as well on the downsides of things that working from home, maybe there is that tendency that people will eventually become disengaged. We need to ensure that there is proper interaction. I think interaction online, it serves its purpose, it's good, but I still believe that people are what they are. We are all humans, and that human element of the interaction, I at least myself, I believe that it cannot be replaced by solely, a virtual world. It's I'm sure, especially those HR people like myself, interviewing online, it was one of my, at least one of the most challenging tasks that I have found. The fact that I am not with that person in the same room, and there's that connection. So communication face to face, I think it's still pretty much important for even individuals and for companies and teams to function as best as they can. And also learning and development. Um, I am sure that most of the businesses, now we are going through a big uphaul in delivering as much training as possible in virtual platforms rather than on face-to-face classes, etc. But I still believe that a blended approach will be a win-win situation. So this is, I think, something that, to be honest, I don't have a clear solution. I've read so many articles, who's in favor, who's against. I don't think it's a matter of finding a balance, but I think keep it at the heart of this, both the individual's needs, but also the business needs as well. So there needs to be this win-win situation that we need to prepare ourselves in finding over the next few years as this situation continues to evolve, because we're still not out of the woods as yet, even though we might have that impression um, looking outside and going to the beach.
Thank you, David. Excellent answer. I can see that we're already quite tight on time, so maybe, and we still have a couple of questions to go through, so maybe we can keep the answers a bit shorter to make sure that we finish by 1 p.m. Sarah, this is something that you have already mentioned in your first reply. We know that a large chunk of the population, and even you mentioned that some of your employees lacked equipment, such as laptops, to work from home, or they did not have a suitable or private place to work. How was this addressed exactly in Go? For example, did your IT department procure laptops for your staff? How did you go
Yes.
about it?
So when it comes to the equipment part, that was all taken care of, and I must say very fast. The IT department did a brilliant job. Most of our employees already were all laptop based. We already had an online system. Many departments did not work with pen and paper, but things were already online. So there was, for the majority, we were already quite set, but there was a fraction of the organization that sort of needed to sort of come to that. And our IT department, yes, they provided laptops for whoever was left that didn't have laptops, and that was taken care of very fast. We also moved into the digital signature very fast as well. Everything went online very, very fast. But I think if I can twist this question around, what I would focus on, because obviously the equipment per se, a company they can get the equipment, whatever it is, whether it's equipment, the desks, the chairs, the ergonomics at the remote setup, that can happen. But what was interesting was how we started to change the way we do things as well. So when you're at the office, you can look at your colleague, or you can look at your team leader or what have you, and get that quick answer. Now it was a bit different. So what we did was we organized what we called, the big conversations. They happen a couple of times a year. And through those conversations, we actually changed processes, because people needed to be empowered, because you need to act fast. You're not, you can't just turn to your colleague and get your answer, or, what have you. So we actually looked at changing certain policies and procedures which therefore obviously the employees were very pleased about, because they can literally run, they can take more decisions. We're not only empowering, but what we say is we're giving power, literally. So you assume trust, you give employees the power that they need to get their job done, and then if something happens and we need to obviously address it, we learn from it. But I think with this question, the biggest change was changing policies and procedures, which, to be honest, even if we had to come back to the office, which we won't like fully, would still make complete sense. And it's like, why didn't we think of this before, so to say? But yes, many processes were addressed in making sure that our people can act and work fast, remotely, comfortably, for them to be able to feel that they're not being every time stalled, so to say.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. And as they say, necessity breeds innovation. So this is
Exactly.
an outcome that will be kept at go in the long term, even past COVID. Uh, Caroline, with financial services companies, there is perhaps an even greater focus on security due to the type of data that is exchanged and stored and processed. Do you see this as a challenge which we must overcome, or is it something that it's already handled? It's already
Well, definitely, obviously. I mean, it is always a challenge, right? Because the level of security is very high, especially in a highly regulated environment. So for us, that was key. So in fact, we spent the beginning, I think, when we were in lockdown, adjusting and ensuring that, security first, and then, we start working remotely. So at a global level, actually, we had to change and implement further security measures because obviously, all the world went into lockdown. So a lot of work, again, thanks to our IT and all the team that worked at a global level to ensure this, because obviously a lot of work went on our end on this front, cybersecurity. If you see reports, of online fraud, of higher risks now with, online transactions, one has to be, more aware of these things, more ensuring that the system we use are safe. As like Go, almost all our employees were already laptop based, so it was not, but definitely we have to get maybe newer models to ensure they can work better for our employees. So we help them to give them better devices. But I think security is key. So lots and lots of things we had to change and implement to ensure that we could continue working from home in a secure way. And also in the policies we created, we were very clear of, what you can do and you cannot do if you're working from home. Or, for example, one thing which we shared when we were communicating with people, that working remotely doesn't mean, especially at least in the financial sector, you can take your laptop, go in a coffee shop and work. That's no go because that would be a breach. So where you're working is very important, especially when you are dealing with sensitive information. So it's not like sometimes you see some people in a coffee shop, working their way around in a bar or something. That's not possible in our sector. That would be a big risk. So yeah, there are rules. So we have rules, and these need to be clearly communicated, which we communicated a lot, and we still need to continue. But definitely, this experience now has prepared us. We have the things in place, but definitely that doesn't mean that you can let your guard down. Absolutely not.
perfect. Thank you, Caroline, for sharing HSBC Motors' experience when dealing with this issue. Was it something that has been mentioned, as you said, on a global level and even in our discussions with other businesses in this sector? David, Our respondents in the survey that MBB conducted reported a positive effect on working from home on various fronts, but especially so on their self-assessed level of satisfaction, motivation, and even productivity, which is something that you have already mentioned in your previous interventions. So, would you say that this is also the case within your group of companies?
Yes, at least our surveys, they show a very much similar pattern to what your surveys have are showing. So in general, if you had to take it, if you had to take collectively, yes, there is a little bit of a distinction in between. If you are on the managerial side, maybe they are a little bit less happy of not coming to the office than the rest. But when it comes to productivity, satisfaction, and motivation, we could not see any indicators that shown differently. So I would say that they were pretty much at least on the higher side than in previous years. Now we have to see if on continuation basis this level of motivation, engagement, and productivity will remain, even though I believe that if it is managed appropriately, I don't see why it shouldn't.
It's interesting that you mention also the perspective of managers, because it's something that also agrees with our own findings, that the higher up you are in that organization, the less positively you perceive working from home. But then it also involves aspects such as supervising your staff, and it becomes much more complicated, I guess.
No, I think even taking in consideration Natalia's comment here on the site chat, I believe that yes, companies, they need to invest more on how to train people how to manage their teams online. It's not an easy task. So let's face it. And the way how it came, people were not prepared. So we found ourselves in this situation, and we had to learn over time. Now I think that these findings and these learnings, they need to be made, I would call them much more permanent in nature. And especially when it comes to our training and development of people, ensure that these competencies, are included in the individual development plans of our team leaders.
Thank you, David. I have a final question for all three of you. So maybe we can start off with Sarah. And I'd appreciate brief answers because we've really run out of time now. Is there any type of support, such as financial, legislative, etc., which you think businesses would need to help facilitate remote working policies in the long term?
Yes, definitely there will be the need for us to continue to support remote first setup. So again, it really much depends on the business itself and the culture and the employees and what their particular needs are. As David mentioned, for sure, there is what we might refer to as remote assistance, for example, or an allowance. But then, of course, there would be the more of the gray areas, right? So making sure that um, we balance the dance between the business needs and the productivity vs our employees' needs and their well-being. So well-being is, in my mind, a trifactor. So you have the physical, the mental, and the social well-being. And definitely here support will be constantly ongoing. So employees' needs evolve. And what motivated me last year might not be the same thing that motivates me this year. And the business needs to recognize that and adapt to those needs. So I would say that the support is something that is going to be constantly ongoing, open communication, open feedback, getting that honest feedback from our people and implementing, making sure we find the balance and implementing and protecting both our people and the business and how we run the business.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Caroline?
I think in short, not repeating what obviously Sarah has mentioned, because there is a lot of the same from our approach, but it is worth mentioning that, you know, the EU is currently revising the teleworking legislation as well. So, you know, once this is enforced, I think all organizations will need to have a good look at what they're doing vis-a-vis in relation with the legislation. So I believe more to come on that front very soon on all of us. Secondly, obviously, in some countries like the UK, there is already some legislation in place where HSBC has already aligned the policies. And in fact, in order to be a bit more proactive, we are already working and discussing with our partners in the UK, I mean with our group counterpart, to start reviewing this as well, because ultimately we should not wait for the legislation. I mean, we are now in the situation where we are saying we embrace hybrid working. So I think things need to evolve and change in line with that. It cannot be one-way street, right? So again, striking the balance, providing, you know, a lot of capability building, but also looking at the legislation, how it will evolve, and the policies that will need to change with it.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And David, your perspective?
Yeah, basically, I see three main things. One of them was already mentioned by Caroline. I think there needs to be a solid legal framework, you know, in order to ensure that the right to disconnect is clearly defined from a legislative point of view, that not only protects the employees but also protects the employer. So that's one. And I'm sure that moving forward, there are many other things that you know, countries need to look within their employment legislation in order to reflect the new realities. So, you know, I mean, there are plenty of other points that needs to be looked into, not just the right to disconnect. I think the second one is education. I think that this pandemic, as I said at the very beginning, has taught us a great lesson. It is a new reality, and I think that people as well, and even companies, sometimes they need support in education and learning from this experience how to move ahead. And thirdly, I believe that we should as well connect the fact that working from home, it can be very easily as well to connect it with sustainability, as Caroline has said. And I believe that in a way, shape or form, which, you know, it might be a discussion on its own, how these practices can be incentivized as well. Because at the end of the day, you know, working remotely, one of the benefits of that will also be, you know, all the reasons that Caroline has mentioned in her first intervention. So I would look at those 3 points in general.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And thank you, everyone, for your excellent interventions during this webinar. It was a real pleasure to get to know your perspectives and your opinions on this rather complex topic, because as we said, it's not black or white, it's not all or nothing, but we really have to see the nuance behind it and try to make it work for all businesses and all employees. This brings to a close our second webinar in this lunchtime web series. I thank our panelists again and all participants for joining us this afternoon. Next week, we'll have our final webinar, this time focusing on the policy aspect when it comes to working from home and remote working, where we will rope in Dr. Kirsten Kutayar-Miller, representing the Malta Council for Economic and Social Development, and also Ms. Fabienne Rogier, representing the Malta Chamber of Commerce HR and Talent Committee. Thank you very much, and I wish everyone a good rest of their day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.